Welcome to the NGRN Talks. Today our podcast focuses on the presidential elections in the Czech Republic. According to the results of the first round, Petr Pavel, former army general who served as the chairman of the NATO Military Committee, and Andrey Babish, former prime minister, received almost equal number of votes, 35%, and will face each other in a runoff. The favorite of the second round is Petr Pavel. Polls tell us that he is ahead of Babish by more than 10%. In the context of the Russian-Ukrainian war, the Czech elections draw attention to the fact that Andrey Babish in his election campaign bet on anti-military agenda. What is behind this, pro-Russian position or election technology? To find out the answers, I talked to Pavel Havlíček, research fellow of the Association of International Affairs Research Center, about the influence of the Russian war on the course of the presidential elections in the Czech Republic and possible complications for Ukraine in the case of Babish victory. Mr. Havlíček, whether the ongoing Russian invasion against Ukraine had an effect on the priorities of the Czech voters.
Thank you, Volodymyr. Indeed, the Russian war against Ukraine had very serious implications for both of the tours of the Czech presidential election in January this year. It was a particularly strong moment after the first round of election, which led to the escalation by the former Prime Minister of the Czech Republic, Andrey Babish, who during the concluding final conference assessing the results of the first round, which brought him to the second tour together with the General Petr Pavel, actually served as an opportunity for him to attack Mr. Pavel for continuation of war, for promoting militarism, in fact, and he even compared the General Petr Pavel with the Russian President Vladimir Putin when he said that it would be only the second head of state and head of the country being an operative, sort of secret service agent after Vladimir Putin, that if the General Petr Pavel would enter the Prague Castle office. So here, obviously, this is a very strong momentum and motif for the presidential campaign, and this goes on during the second tour and the interim period, which is going on right now, especially, for example, if looking at the series of billboards that have been distributed by Andrey Babish, who called himself these billboards a diplomat rather than a soldier or a general. So looking for and appealing to a peaceful solution of the Russian war against Ukraine. Rather ridiculous one, but in any case, this is his position, similar to Viktor Orban, who appealed in the 2 year ago during the parliamentary elections on this peace note and trying to sort of stop violence note, rather than support for Ukraine and ending the war according to the conditions determined by Ukraine itself. So to better understand what are the main lines of attack of Mr. Babish against the General Petr Pavel, it is not only the point that part of the ruling coalition in the Czech government actually endorsed General Petr Pavel for the second tour and also even the first one, but then also obviously pointing out his military background, which Andrey Babish tries to ridicule. He tries to present him as a personality which is not really needed in the office of the Prague Castle, because we have already the chief of staff of military forces, and he has been trying for the last couple of days to basically push him into the corner and have a very negative campaign, simply because he is very much aware that he is rather on the losing ground, and he will find it very hard to mobilize his own supporters to further extent, because he has surpassed the ever in history maximum for his party by 5% and roughly 500,000 of votes, reaching to 2 million.
Who may be behind the distribution of the SMS messages with an appeal on behalf of Petr Pavel to go to war in Ukraine?
What is important here, as you are pointing out, is the strongly negative and manipulative campaign that has been led against the General Petr Pavel, including these SMS messages that have been distributed to part of the electorate, particularly of the male origin and also of the elderly, calling them basically supposedly being addressed by the General Petr Pavel, thanking them for their support for the first round, and now also going and calling them into service through the mobilization centers of the army of the Czech Republic. This has been a highly manipulative campaign that has been not really, it has not been proven that this has been directly motivated by the other sort of campaign team of Andrey Babish directly. There has been some investigation into this affair, which has been rather prominent and strongly negative. Playing a negative note, but it was impossible to trace it back to Andrey Babish, and it has been rather some groups that are like-minded for his campaign and are strongly motivated to spread disinformation against the victory of the General Petr Pavel. This has not only been this case that you mentioned. There's been also a series of the so-called chain emails spreading further disinformation on this very same topic. For example, accusing the General Petr Pavel that after his election there would be a general mobilization in support of Ukraine and sending people to the war. So here, this has been another attempt, not only by the SMS messages serving a similar goal as the chain emails, but there has been multiple channels through which the manipulative messaging has been distributed, and this has also resonated within the closed media environment, for example, in the digital space and closed echo chambers where similar messages have been also spread. So this has been one of the big topics, as I mentioned. It is going back to the idea of Mr. Babish being a diplomat, being a peacekeeper and peace sort of a negotiator during the only one debate before his tour in which he participated in person. He also spoke about his peace plan, which should include bringing all the important players around to one table, including the Ukraine president, Mr. Zelensky, Emmanuel Macron, the American US president, but he did not mention on Russia. So obviously his plan being very manipulative and very sort of weak in nature. But in any case, this has been something that he has actively promoted, and he has tried to position himself as an experienced politician with many contacts, able to push through this peaceful solution. So this has been his note and line of attack against the General Petr Pavel.
Will it become more difficult for the Czech government to provide military aid to Ukraine in the case of Babish victory?
It is very important to better understand that, sufficiently understand that the competences of the Czech president does not in any possible sense affect military cooperation and support for Ukraine in military defense and security realm. It is the sole competence of the Czech government, even if, obviously, formally, the Czech president is the commander-in-chief of the military force. Indeed, in this respect, this position is important, but when it comes to the decision-making on an everyday basis or providing military aid to Ukraine, the Czech president has no competences whatsoever. So this is first to understand. Second, what is important here to understand is that Mr. Babish, he is not an anti-Ukrainian politician. He is a populist in nature, and he's just trying to abuse this topic for his personal gain. This does not mean that if he was elected, he would sort of boycott, he would make the life of Czech-Ukraine relations anyhow more complicated and difficult. This line of argumentation is is rather against the general Petr Pavel and his military background, but also the Czech government led by Petr Fiala. So in that sense, clearly, it is the case that the general Petr Pavel will be much more constructive player and much more cooperative actor within the Czech political system than Mr. Babish. But at the end of the day, I'm not convinced, and I don't think that anybody actually believes that Andrey Babish would be against the Czech support for Ukraine. He would genuinely believe or act in the nature of undermining Czech-Ukrainian relations, or even more to promote the Russian sort of line of within the Czech foreign policy agenda. This would not happen, and this is clearly only a populist note, which is, and his sort of campaign, the chief of the campaign also said that this is something that they feel, and they made these sort of surveys, that it resonates with part of the Czech electorate, part of the Czech society is already feeling the consequences of the Russian war on their pockets, on their wallets, and also are therefore mostly from these socioeconomic motifs rather opposing any kind of prolongation of the war without necessarily understanding the context or what it would mean in practice. So this is something that they are playing on as a note. This is resonating with part of its electorate. This is why they are saying that, but this would not, I'm convinced, in practice mean that Andrey Babiš would anyhow stop the Czech military aid for Ukraine, which has been so important within the first phase of the war, and is still thanks to the Western support, Western sponsorship of Czech companies providing further weaponry for the Ukrainian army in this just fight for your freedom and also ours. So here, nothing would really change that. This is just a political position and posture within the campaign right now, and this is exactly coming from these backgrounds that I have tried to explain. But once again, it does not lie within the competence of the Czech president to stop any military support or significantly influence the defense and security policy of the Czech government, because it is within its own competence.
Subscribe here to receive more videos from the new Geopolitics Research Network.